Hey everybody, it's Chase with AV Pop Culture again, and today I'm here to bring you 10 movies that completely flopped at the box office that are now considered great films, and some of them are considered absolute classics. So pop that tape in, I got you, let's go do this. All right, so in my never ending quest to prove that anybody can be wrong, especially film critics, and in a lot of times, even us film going public can be wrong initially. I am here to bring you 10 films that were complete flops at the box office. A lot of times they were critically panned by audiences, and in some cases, hurt the careers of very famous directors and cost some of them jobs. And now those films have gone on to be considered absolute classics. Some of them are great films. I mean, they're all considered great films now, and some of them are considered absolute classics. I don't necessarily agree that they're all great films. Most of them, yes, but there is one, maybe two, that I consider good films, and I can understand why they're held up the way they are in some ways, even if I don't get it. But there are some films that are some of my favorites ever, and that you couldn't pass five people on the street at random and they wouldn't know this film, consider these films classics. So a lot of times critics are just wrong. Maybe a film is ahead of its time. Maybe it is completely marketed wrong. Who knows? But for whatever reason, these films just completely flopped. But now they are absolutely loved and just classics in most cases. So let's go ahead and get to the list, starting with the most recent. Now, I don't have all these on physical media. You guys know I'm rebuilding my collection and have specific targets in the definitive collection, so I'm not just running out and grabbing everything. But the most recent one, I think, on this list is 2019's Doctor Sleep. This film is a sequel to The Shining, and it completely flopped when it came out. It had a $50 million operating budget. That doesn't count marketing or anything else. These budgets that I'm going to mention are just the actual production budgets, not marketing or anything else that went into them. So Doctor Sleep had a budget of just north of 50 million and made $31 million at the box office. And now, and this is a film that I really like, there are some people that actually prefer Doctor Sleep to The Shining. They think that it's better than The Shining, and it is a really good movie. It just came out at a time where they've started this new process of only having films be at the theater for a couple of weeks and then putting them on streaming and everything else and not giving them a fair shot. They need to go back to the old model where a film was there for 3 to 6 months at the theater, then it was 3 to 6 months before it was released for sale, and then another couple months before it was released for rent. And you go back to that model and give these films a fair shake, because I think Doctor Sleep is a very good movie, and I'm glad to see that it is now considered. It's made tons of money since, and I'm glad to see that it is doing better. So that is the most recent flop at the box office that is considered to be a really good movie, because a lot of people, including some critics now who panned it initially, consider it better than The Shining. Very interesting. I wouldn't go that far, but it is really good. Next up is one that I do have, and this is 1993's Dazed and Confused. Just picked this up during the Criterion sale. Even sent one of these to my buddy Brian over at the Last Movie Standing to help him cope with No Buy July, because I know he loves this film, and that just points to it. A lot of people love this film, despite the fact that it made about $7.5 or $8 million total at the box office off of about a $7 to $8 million operating budget, production budget. So that doesn't count the marketing. That means they spent even more and stuff on that. And now this Richard Linklater film, part of the Criterion Collection, is considered an absolute American classic at this point. I mean, all right, all right, all right. It is funny because it's a early 90s movie that feels like an 80s movie that is supposed to be a 70s movie. So it's a really interesting concept, but Dazed and Confused, when it came out, was not what it is considered now. And now it is considered a great film that even Criterion added to their collection. All right, next up is one that I'm surprisingly do not have on physical media in any way, and because I love Tarantino, but this is 2007's Grindhouse. Now this is Planet Terror and Death Proof together to make Grindhouse, and it's got Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, and this film had a $70 million to $75 million estimated production budget, depending on where you look for your information. It made $25 million at the box office. That's it. 25 million bucks, and that doesn't even count the marketing, so it lost tons of money. But since then, because this was still towards the end of the older model for the theater, so it had its full run at the theater. But then it had the old model of several months later you could buy it, and then several months later you could rent it. So since then, it has made tons of money in the home video world. And of course, it's Tarantino. His legend has grown as he's done more movies, and Robert Rodriguez, and you have this cast in this thing that's insane, and it is considered one of his great films. And then you've got Robert Rodriguez in there, and it's just considered to be held up here as a great Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez film with all these stars. But when it came out, it fell flat on its face. And it just shows you how things can change over time. We're not always right as a public going to the movies, and we're definitely not right as critics most of the time. And a lot of times, though, marketing can make or break a movie. If it is marketed incorrectly, it's not supported, whatever it is. And Grindhouse, I mean, it's like a really long movie and a double feature. It's kind of a hard sell that I think maybe works better on home video, because you could watch one movie, then the other movie later, however you wanted to do that. But Grindhouse on the list. Another one that is now considered an American classic and is part of the Criterion Collection that everybody's been telling me to buy, and I have not bought. It is 2001 David Lynch film. It's one of two everybody keeps telling me to buy. I am talking about Holland Drive. Now, I have to admit, I have never seen Holland Drive, but it's part of the Criterion Collection. It is literally held up as an esteem of American cinema now, like one of these things like it and Blue Velvet and stuff like that. But back in 2001, it made just over $6 million on a $17 million production budget. It completely flopped. And I don't know if some of what David Lynch did was like a little ahead of its time, and people get more of the meta, weird, whole vibe that he tends to go for, or what. But since then, like I said, it's migrated. It's become part of the Criterion Collection now, and they are very, selective about their movies and what they consider to be American cinema classics and important films. And they've selected Holland Drive, and critics have gone back and looked at it differently, as with David Lynch's other films, and people clamor to get this movie. So Holland Drive is another one that completely flopped initially, and now is considered a classic. All right, moving on to some even bigger ones. This is where we start to get really probably going to surprise some people. 1999's Fight Club. It's hard to believe now because Fight Club has built, it's not only considered a great film and a cult hit and a classic and all that kind of stuff and the great performances and yada, yada, yada. It is hard to imagine now that it completely flopped at the box office. Critics didn't get it. Fans didn't connect with it right away. It wasn't until it reached home video and that whole process that I talked about that people started to be able to get that movie and really watch it and dissect it and get into it and make it a cult classic that it is. It made $37 million at the worldwide box office against a budget of nearly $70 million. Now, again, that doesn't count anything they paid for marketing or anything like that. So you're probably looking more close to $100 million that was spent on a movie that got back like 37 million bucks. So it was a hardcore flop. And yet, here it is. It is a cult hit. People have written books about the movie. People dissect the movie. There are whole fan communities built around the movie. It is talked about and referenced in pop culture and other films all over the place. Fight Club is a huge film, a piece of American cinema history, and yet it was an absolute clunker at the box office. All right, the next one is one that I have talked about before. I don't personally consider this one a classic. I think the movie's okay. I'm glad to have it in my collection. I think it is a little overhyped, and I spent a lot of time talking about it before, so I won't talk about it forever right now. But Donnie Darko completely flopped at the box office, and I mean completely flopped. This movie had about a $7 million, a $6.5 million budget and made about $7 million at the box office. However, it is such a popular film all these years later, and this was 2004. It is one of those films that is the poster child for benefiting from the old system of a theatrical run and then for sale later and then for rent later, because this movie set records for rentals, home video rentals, making the studio who put out the film over $25 million in profits from home video rentals. Doesn't count all the sales and everything else. And now this movie is so hyped up that I did a video about whether this movie is overhyped or not, and people to do entire dissertations on this film. And there is massive communities. You can look on YouTube. There is video after video. It is a piece of American pop culture and cinema history. I still am not in love with this movie. I don't particularly get the need to overhype it, but it is considered that big of a film, and it was beyond a stinker and a clunker when it came out at the box office. There's always tons of reasons why that could happen, but Donnie Darko is like the poster child for needing the old system and the home video and the rental and sale of physical media system back, because it is a film that had no shot at the box office and then absolutely blew up later. All right, there's a couple more that I don't have on physical media. One of them is going to probably shock you because this is considered probably the best Stephen King. Some people consider this the best Stephen King story adaptation ever. The best film that Frank Darabont ever did. Academy Awards should rain down on this film. It is considered an American classic. There's the image of Andy Dufresne like this. I am, of course, talking about Shawshank Redemption. Believe it or not, in 1994, when Shawshank Redemption came out, this movie made, the estimates are between $24 and $28 million against a nearly $30 million budget. So it was a flop. It did not make its money back at the box office. It didn't make tons of money worldwide. That is the amount of money it made at the box office. And as more awards piled on it and critical acclaim came and home theater rental, or home video rentals and sales and everything, now this movie is considered an absolute classic, a 100% classic, a must-have, a must-own, a must-see it once in at least once in your life. Shawshank Redemption falls into that category. It was completely off the map in 1994. At the box office, it flopped completely. That one was kind of shocking to me when I researched this. But see, I'm a Stephen King guy, so I was always going to see anything that had to do with him. So I was shocked to see that, but it absolutely flopped, and it's only later that it has become what it is. All right, we got just a few more left here. Got one more that I do not have right here, and this is, you talk about a cult hit that is a massive part of pop culture. The Dude Abides. We are talking about the Big Lebowski. Believe it or not, as popular as the Big Lebowski is, and the Dude, and everything that goes along with that movie, the Big Lebowski in 1998 only brought in about $18 million on a just over $16 million production budget. It was a flop. They lost money on it. It was not it became popular later. Again, it was the theater run, then the home video sales, then the home video rentals where people could go out and for a few dollars rent it on a Friday night, go home, watch it with their friends, and be like, hey, did you see that movie with the Dude? The Dude Abides. Like, it just spread and got cooler. That's how these movies work. That's how they ingrained themselves and had another life in our society and became a big part of pop culture. And you just don't get that when a movie only has a week or two at the theater. They pull the ripcord, they put it over on streaming somewhere for you to rent, because it's not the same. People are like, I don't want to pay all that to rent that and stream it or what. It's not the same as going out to the theater and people seeing a rush on the new releases, and you were able to grab one that was left off the new release wall, and you go home and watch it and you talk to your friends about it, and everybody's trying to get that movie every weekend and going back to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video to see if it's still there, or your mom and pop place, whatever. It drove a audience to the film that we don't get because streaming is just overloaded with all these selections, and it's crowded and bloated and hard to navigate, and it's censored and all this kind of stuff. They don't have the same ability to become a big part of our society and our pop culture and get a second chance that way again. Without the old model, maybe we never really know about Big Lebowski the way we do now, or Donnie Darko, or some of these films, Fight Club. Who knows? But the Big Lebowski and the Dude couldn't save it. It flopped at the box office. All right, I got a couple of left here, and then I'll have a couple that I kind of like are honorable mentions. And to me, this is two of the biggest that were box office flops. The first one will blow your mind, and I'm having to go all the way back to 1946 for It's a Wonderful Life, the Frank Capra, Jimmy Stewart classic. There is nobody who doesn't know this movie or have heard of this movie. You can't find it. It is a piece of American society in cinema, pop culture. It is ubiquitous throughout our history now since it came out, and it will continue on. Here it is in 4K, a 80-year-old movie in 4K, and it is being sold out. You can't even get it with a slip because you can't get your hands on it. And yet, the director didn't like the movie. Frank Capra didn't really like it. It flopped at the box office. It had a $3.5 million budget, which was actually pretty high for 1946 or 45 when they were filming, and it made about $3.3 million at the box office. Completely flopped. And now, though, is there a movie that is considered more of like a classic at Christmas time and just a part of our society, and Zuzu's Petals, and geez, George, you had such a wonderful life. Like, this movie has been copied 8 million times, 8 million different ways the storyline has been told. Even if you look at something like Adam Sandler's Click, this story has been copied so many times over and over again, and it is a part of Americana, and yet it was an absolute flop at the box office, and the critics didn't like it very much then either. How about that? It's a Wonderful Life was a flop, and now I can't think of anything that's more of a classic. All right, now it is time for one that is hard to believe too. It is the number one biggest flop on this list all time that is now considered one of the best films all time, and maybe the best film by this director all time, even though it performed so poorly at the box office and critics trashed it so much that it cost John Carpenter his next job. He was literally fired, the story is, from his next job because this movie did so poorly at the box office, and I am talking about The Thing. I know that is hard to believe because now this is held up as not only one of John Carpenter's best movies ever or one of the best horror movies ever, it is considered one of the best movies. Like, it is that high in regard. But in 1982, when it came out, it made about $19 million off a like $16 million budget. And critics and fans alike absolutely destroyed this film. Just destroyed it till the point where John Carpenter got fired off of his next job. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. And now we think about how amazing this movie is, and it has jumped up even for me. Because of all that stuff, I was a kid when this was out and popular and coming out on home video and stuff. Maybe partly because of what everybody thought about it. It got skipped around, and then my dad kind of watched it, and I never gave it its fair shot. And maybe it's because I was influenced by that. And now that I've really watched this movie here recently again for the first time in all these years in 4K and really gave it its due, it's jumped up from a movie that I skipped over most of my life to one that's in my top 25 favorite movies all time, maybe top 10 or 15. That much of an effect. And yet, it was panned and flopped at the movies. People didn't want to see it. They didn't want to hear from John Carpenter anymore. It cost him a job. Absolutely insane. That's how wrong we can be, and how the hype train can affect things negatively the same way it can positively. I mean, some of these movies, it's hard to believe. This list could go on. Y'all, you want to hear some other movies that flopped that everybody loves now? How about Rocky Horror Picture Show? How about Clue? How about Blade Runner was a flop? Then now it's considered a sci-fi classic. Citizen Kane was a box office flop. And how about this one? Wizard of Oz. Yes, that Wizard of Oz made $3 million at the box office, which is the equivalent, I think what it said was about $66 million today. The problem is they spent the equivalent of about $100 million to make it. So that movie, The Wizard of Oz, one of like American classics, I mean, absolutely was a flop. That is so hard to believe. But for me, like The Thing and It's a Wonderful Life, they're at the top of the list. They're ones that's hard to believe. You could argue Wizard of Oz because it still made a good bit of money. They just spent a lot of money to do it. But The Thing made nothing, right? It's a Wonderful Life made nothing. And The Thing cost John Carpenter a job. And now it's considered maybe his best film, even over Halloween. I consider it number one in Halloween, too. So it is hard to believe, but yes, the film going public and the critics especially and that hype train can be wrong. And it's usually wrong a lot more than it's right, unfortunately, when you talk about the hype train and critics. Usually, if you ever look at like Rotten Tomatoes or watch an audience score and a critic score, they almost never match. Almost never. The problem is critics can ruin a movie and taint the well, poison the well before people can even get a chance to go see it and make their own opinion. The internet's bad about doing that now. A way around that, and I keep harping on this, go back to the old system, have movies at the theater 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and then have a blackout window after that of 3 to 6 months, and then another big release where you sell it on physical media, and then another blackout of 30 or 45 days, and then do rentals. If you don't want to make video rental stores anymore, then put it out for rent on streaming, and then eventually let it go to streaming the way like cable TV was at the end of the line, and it would finally get to like HBO way after all those other things, and then it would get to broadcast TV. And you get all these different new blips up and new chances to find new audiences and new sales and new revenue. I don't understand why that's not happening, but if I was in charge, it would be. But then again, I'm not too proud or arrogant to say that I was wrong and that an old way was better. So it's not that I'm old, it's that their ideas are stupid. But anyway, I just wanted to share with you this list of these films that are absolutely classics and in most cases absolutely great films that were not so great at the box office when they came out. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Considering joining here, you can join at the link below here at YouTube or on my Patreon. And I can do all kinds of things. You'll get your name in here, your name in lights. You'll get behind the scenes stuff, extra videos, early access to videos, free swag when I do stuff every now and then, copies of my movie, all kinds of stuff. But you don't have to do any of that to hang out here. Just like and subscribe and ring that bell and become part of the pop culture friends and family. And I really thank you all so much for watching and sharing my videos. It really does mean a lot to me. And until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AVA Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.